Behavioral Ecology, Part A. The key points with regard to behavioral ecology: how does behavior evolve? What role does the ecosystem play in the evolution of behavior? And how do social systems such as territoriality and social hierarchies evolve? How do behaviors evolve? Let's start with that. Well, to be honest with you, they evolve pretty much like any trait of an organism. Behaviors contribute to fitness. Behaviors are genetically, or at least partially, genetically controlled. That is, they're inheritable and subject to natural selection. Like other traits, each behavior has both a fitness cost and a fitness benefit. Think, for instance, of a behavior, a courtship behavior, which makes you very obvious to members of the other sex. That's great. That's a benefit. That very same behavior may make you very obvious to a potential predator. That's a cost. Therefore, we find that selection favors behaviors for which the benefits outweigh the costs. Behaviors are also the result of both genetic makeup as well as the environment and the experience of an individual, the sort of nature versus nurture. Few behaviors are purely genetically fixed, and few are purely the result of the environment. There's a mix. And this behavioral plasticity is in itself an adaptation. The relative contributions of the environment and genetics in behavior can be measured as heritability. Now, heritability can be looked at mathematically, where R is the change in the trait, and H squared is the heritability. I'm not worried about this equation. What I want you to remember is that traits with high heritability respond to natural selection more rapidly than traits with low heritability. That's the important concept. What mechanisms are the fundamental mechanisms of behavioral interaction? Well, the first concept we need to keep in mind is stimulus response, that a specific behavior is elicited by a specific response. Sort of a almost psychological tenet, if you will, stimulus response. Here, for example, we see red and yellow color inside the beaks, and the chirping sounds of chicks, that would be the stimulus, stimulates the feeding behavior in the female. That's the response. So the stimulus response is the behavioral interaction. Stimulus response behaviors are highly stereotyped, that is, they don't vary very much. This is particularly true in courtship behaviors in birds and other species, in which the action of a male and female are fixed, and each elicits a specific response. Any variation in that will often result in the courtship breaking down and an unsuccessful reproductive event. Another important aspect of behavioral interaction is communication, which uses signals to convey information from one organism to another. These signals can be visual, auditory, olfactory, or tactile, or even a combination of both. Think about the birds. The color inside their beaks and their chirping elicited a behavior from the female. Communication may also convey discrete or graded information. For example, an alarm call can say predator present, predator not present, sort of a yes or no concept. Or it can provide graded information, that is, alarm calls, for instance, of chickadees, can warn about the presence of a raptor predator and also communicate about the potential threat, that is, the size of the predator or raptor in this case. Because reproduction is so fundamentally important as a behavior in organisms, we find that we need to talk about sexual selection. Sexual selection being the concept of selecting an appropriate mate for reproductive purposes. Sexual dimorphism, the concept related to sexual selection, in that males and females are different from one another. As you can see in this picture, the male in the background is colorful, the female in the foreground less so. Sexual dimorphism indicates that different selective forces operate on males and females. One sex, typically it's the female, is able to constitute an important selective force on the other, and we'll talk about how that happens in a moment. Let's talk about this battle of the sexes, this sexual dependent reproductive physiology. First of all, females. Females incur high anatomical, physiological, and energetic costs of reproduction. That is, the business of producing a nest, of laying eggs, that is the actual production of the egg, the incubation of those eggs, the feeding of those hatchlings, all are energetically costly. Or in the case of mammals, the maintaining of the embryo inside the maternal body, the nutritional and metabolic support provided for that organism during gestation, then the production of milk in lactation, you can see, energetically costly. Female fitness, therefore, cannot increase indefinitely by increasing the quantity, the number of progeny. Female fitness actually increases as a function of the quality, not number, but quality of the progeny. Males, let's look at that. It's a different story. There, male's contribution to reproduction is sperm, and it's energetically cheap. In the absence of other constraints, male fitness increases with the number of females he inseminates, the number of partners he has. This results in a very important concept of sexual selection. This manifests itself generally in two ways: female choice and male-male competition. Male-male competition is, as the term would suggest, the sort of infighting or displays that occur among males to choose which male will present himself for courtship and mating. Female choice, as the term would suggest, is the female deciding with whom she will mate. Both of these sexual selective forces, female choice and male-male competition, have interactions that are both sexual as far as reproduction and are going to be subject to natural selection. One aspect of this is the concept of balance hypothesis. The balance hypothesis basically states that male traits are exaggerated by female choice, see female choice, until their overall fitness cost is too high. This is an example of an evolutionary trade-off. As you can see on the graph here, we're thinking of, for instance, a bird in which the female selects based on the length of tail feathers. Now, I have more to say about this in class, but just use that as an example. What we find is overall fitness will therefore increase as tail feathers, the length of tail feathers or the brightness or colorfulness of the tail feathers increase. This will continue until we reach a point where the cost is simply too high. Maybe it just becomes unwieldy or difficult to fly or to escape predators, whatever the case may be. That's the balance hypothesis. The other aspect of sexual selection is truth in advertising. Here, elaborate phenotypic traits of males, the tail feathers, the courtship behaviors, the antlers, whatever the case may be, these traits of the males are an indicator of overall fitness. They have to be truthful indicators of overall fitness. These help females choose a superior male, thereby increasing the quality of her progeny. And that's the important aspect, because remember I said that's how she has to look at this. She has to look at quality, not quantity. Now, the truth in advertising hypothesis indicates that we have to have a real relationship between this, for instance, this bird displaying here that his display pattern and his feathers indicates something about his fitness. There's the possibility of cheating, and cheating does happen in the natural world, but for the most part, there's a real truth in advertising that occurs here with sexual selection. Now, ecological factors will influence the mating system of a species. Now, the mating system is simply the set of relationships between males and females during reproduction. These can involve the number of mates an individual copulates with during the breeding season, the relative contribution of males and females to parental care, or how long the relationship between males and females lasts. As a result, we talk about sort of three fundamental. These could be subdivided many times, and if we were in an animal behavior course, we would take this apart. But for now, think of three possibilities: monogamy, polygyny, and polyandry. Monogamy is a condition, a mating system in which males and females mate one-on-one. That is, males mate with a single female. Generally, this will be of two types, either lifelong, where the male and female partner for the lifetime, or at least reproductive lifetime, or serial monogamy, in which the monogamous relationship lasts for a single breeding season. That will stay together. Polygyny, on the other hand, is when each male mates with more than one female during a breeding season. And finally, polyandry, each female mates with more than one male during a breeding season. Now, polygyny is the more common condition. And what we have to have happening in polygyny is really a decision made here that the male does or does not stay with the female. And the key here, without getting into too much detail, is can the male provide some benefit or derive some benefit by staying? That is, can he provide food, protection? Can he somehow contribute to his own fitness by staying? If he can, then he will stay. If he cannot, then he will leave. And in many cases with birds, we might find that polygyny happens because the resources are such that the organism, that the male cannot contribute by staying, and therefore would leave and find another, and actually find another mate. Now, the ecological determinants of polygyny would be the spatial distribution of females, that are the potential for males to control and ensure access to more than one female dependent upon the spatial distribution of the females. That is, if they're aggregated together, there's a chance he could keep control over them, and therefore he would have a harem or a herd or a group of females under his direction. The other would be spatial distribution of other critical resources. That is, if critical resources are distributed such that males can defend them, then the males may obtain a territory that attracts multiple females. We'll talk about territoriality later on. One kind of behavioral determinant in polygyny is lek mating species. Here, as you can see in this picture, what we have are males displaying together in traditional sites. These sites are known as leks. They're just small areas. And here you see two males strutting their stuff, if you will, and the female is standing there. She's on the rock. She's standing there, and the female chooses the mate based upon these displays. And a few males are able to really control the majority of copulations based upon these mating behaviors. Monogamy is going to occur, in the most simplest of terms, when there is a reason to stay. That is, when both the male and female can contribute to the survival and therefore the survival of offspring, and therefore their fitness. If successful rearing of both young If successful rearing of the young requires both parents, then monogamy is advantageous for both species, is what I'm saying. See, both can contribute. If reproduction is highly synchronous due to seasonality or resource phenology, providing parental care is more advantageous to a male than seeking additional copulations, and therefore he will stay with a single female. So the environment can influence the reproductive behavior of these individuals. Monogamy occurs because there's this bond between one male and one female, and they share parental care. And again, it's got to be because both individuals, male and female, can contribute to the survival and therefore the fitness, their own fitness, the survival of their offspring and therefore their fitness. Polyandry, which is very rare, this is again where there's one female with multiple males. The fitness benefit to females will be that there are some gifts given, that is, there might be food brought as a gift, reducing the probability of mating to a poor male because they're mating with several males. This occurs under really usually extreme conditions, that is, conditions where the number of males are limited, where the number of females are limited and there's multiple males, that is, the sex ratio of the population is skewed, or the resources are such that there's a problem, or in some cases where the males can greatly contribute to the parental care. For instance, in prairie chickens, males are very good at incubating the eggs. So the female will lay the eggs and the male will take over the nest. She can go then mate with another male and he takes care of that nest, and so on and so forth. In that case, the male is able to help by incubation and takes over sole incubation. And second of all, there are only a few females in the population versus males. So that's the sort of situations when polyandry takes place. These occur often in bird species again, but can occur in other species. Finally, I want to make some comments about plant mating systems. Plants also have to deal with reproductive behaviors. You just don't think of it in the same way. And generally, there's sort of three categories here. Outcrossing, which is mating among different individuals of a population. Autogamy, which is self-fertilization. And apomixis, which is asexual reproduction. Now, long-distance dispersal and colonizing abilities favor autogamy, okay? Whereas the ability to exploit local resources rapidly or rapidly changing or ephemeral conditions favors apomixis or sexual reproduction. So plants alter their reproductive behaviors, quote unquote, based upon ecological determinants. Okay, what are the take-homes from this presentation? First, the stimulus response system underlies most of animal behavior. Communication is a specialized form of stimulus response that conveys information among conspecifics. Males and females differ in the means by which their reproductive success increases. Because females tend to be the limiting sexual resource, female choice exerts selective pressure on males, that's sexual selection, and may result in sexual dimorphism. The mating system is a response to the sexual selection, the distribution of female and other resources within the population.